Hey, this is Matt Urtz, the Madison County historian. We are still working to document the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, and we are very lucky today to have Father Kevin Corcoran of St. James Church in Cazenovia and St. Patrick's Church in Chittenango. Father, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So talk a little bit about, tell us a little bit about both the churches and their roles in their local communities.
Yeah, both churches have been around since the late 1800s, or 1900s rather. The 1800s, I'm sorry, the pandemic confuses time. But here at St. James around 1847, same thing for St. Patrick's. They even had a relationship with each other back in the day, sharing a priest who would go back and forth. But both parishes, over 800 families. St. Patrick's is a little smaller than St. James, but relatively, 800, 700 families in each case. And they are both pretty involved in the communities because a lot of the residents of communities belong to these two churches. So yeah, we're very tied in with here at St. James with the schools, because the high school and the middle school are right across the street from us.
Yep.
So we're right in the middle of things. St. Patrick's is outside the village, so less so for them.
Okay. Talk a little bit about when COVID first appeared on your guys' radar and how you guys started to talk about and figure out we might have to do something.
Yeah, even before they shut us down in terms of being able to hold Sunday services, we already talked about the staff of both parishes, how to stay connected to people. St. James has a very active Facebook page and website, and St. Patrick's has a really good website as well. So we decided that we would keep posting as much as we could, updates, messages from myself, from others. We also, when we would find a helpful resource or an article to help people cope with the day-to-day of something long-term, where everything that's normal has been interrupted, we would refer people to those. So we talked early on, the days before, because we wanted to keep in touch with everybody. So,
okay. So in the moment, we all adapted on the fly. The date I've used a lot is March 11th. It kind of became real for people. As silly as it sounds, that's when the NBA season was canceled. That's when Tom Hanks announced he had been diagnosed. And that's when we started hearing murmurs. I think the state went to 50%. That was a Wednesday night. So the following Monday, which was, I think, the 16th.
yes.
And we were closed by March 20th. When did you guys start to get those directives, and how quickly did you have to adapt?
Yeah, well, right on March 16th, that was pretty much the date everything stopped.
Okay.
We stopped everything after that date. I think it was late in the week, just before St. Patrick's Day, and we were actually very glad to cooperate with that, because we saw what was happening, especially in New York City. And it was really concerning and I think frightening for a lot of people. So yeah, that's kind of when things stop.
Okay. When this goes on, people still, probably even more so, need emotional help. You also have folks that are dying. I don't know that Chittenango, we had the more recent things with the Grand, but I'm not sure you guys had a number of deaths, but you probably do have just people in general dying. Talk about having to adapt to a new way of helping people grieve, because we can't do the traditional method. You can't hug, you can't go over and sit at their kitchen table. So talk about kind of having to deal with that.
Yeah, so, and I have a unique perspective on that, because my mother died on a Friday, March 27th, after we were into the pandemic in an assisted living facility in Manlius, where I'd only been able to communicate her with my brothers and sisters through Zoom or through FaceTime. But yeah, it's been difficult because we have not been holding funerals in the church. We've been doing graveside services. And in some cases, that's really difficult, especially with sudden deaths, especially if a person is younger. The whole process of having calling hours at a funeral home and a service in the church, and then the graveside service is gone. So that's really difficult. In other cases, people sort of welcomed the simplicity of it. out of concern for older relatives or their parents, because a lot of the deaths have been older people. And that's true in both parishes. And in terms of our ability to get to people who are really sick, our deacon here happens to be also a hospice nurse. So he's been called into the grant, for example,
Okay.
a lot. Yeah.
So talk about then switching to the order comes down that you guys can't have mass in person. Talk about that process where you go from, I think we all have some use of technology in the modern era, but we all had to learn a lot of stuff very quickly. Yes. Stuff like Zoom and,
yes.
and kind of understanding what's going on. So talk about that process and how you were able to do that.
Yes, through people who had already been using Zoom, especially people who had been connected to Lemoyne College, they helped to host meetings, not only with the staff, but also to put out to parishioners at St. James and St. Patrick's that every Sunday at 10 o'clock, we'd have a word service, and we'd have time where people could share and talk to each other in breakout rooms. So that was usually helpful. And then in addition to that, someone asked me on my staff to record a weekly message to be posted every Sunday to encourage people to reflect upon where we are and to also reflect upon faith. It was also posted on Facebook. So we started doing that, and it's been very effective. We've also sent out multiple letters to people who are not connected to the internet to tell them where things are and to encourage them. So that's where we've kept in contact with everybody.
Okay. What about outreach? You guys, most churches typically are very active in their outreach. Have you been able to find ways to adapt that, whether it be through something like Zoom? I know one church we talked to, they called it a cocktail hour, but there was no drinks. And it was basically, they just kind of opened and anybody who wanted to come in could just come and chat. It was a way to kind of check up on people, make sure they were in the right headspace, because a lot of people have struggled with that in this moment in time. Talk about that kind of outreach and how you guys worked to make sure your flock was doing okay.
Yeah, luckily we have a good, we really have a good network of people who keep track of each other. And so when somebody's been struggling, they've asked me to give them a call. And that's exactly what we do. I did that this morning. And that seems to be immensely helpful for people just to hear a familiar voice on the other end, especially somebody who's, they see every week, in church, one of the church leaders or a member of the staff. So we've been doing that because we are concerned, especially as this continues on. This has become extremely stressful, mentally, physically, and spiritually on people. And it's actually getting to be even more so because it's going on a long time. People are actually grieving the loss of their routines and their life as it was, and they're feeling that. So we are really in tune with that, and we're starting to even pay even more attention to it because now, a few months and 15 or 16 days into this, it's really more difficult for certain people, and we want to make sure that they're attended to.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it, because one of the things we don't talk about is we're kind of inundated with this news anywhere you turn. And our normal routines for kind of getting that out, there's a lot more people walking. But if you're not able to do stuff like that, there's a lot of people that are struggling, and it's good that you're making yourself available. Talk a little bit about you guys have an initiative, a little program called the Mustard Seed. Would you mind explaining kind of how that's helping people during the pandemic?
Yes, the Mustard Seed it's located out of the parish here in Cazenovia, but we have an actual outreach center in Georgetown, the rural areas of Madison County, which always have the greatest needs. Wonderful people, very connected to each other and their children. It's just that the extra assistance, including basic things that we get at the drugstore that we take for granted that are expensive. So any of those needs that people have, we respond to them, and have been through the pandemic. We haven't received a lot of extra requests. We did get a request for some housing assistance and furniture assistance, which I became a part of, and getting somebody into an apartment because they had nowhere to go. They were living in a hotel room, a very tiny hotel, and they had a family. So we've been doing those things as well. We're always ready to do whatever people need, and the needs we've always predicted will start to increase even more as this thing just drags on, because a lot of people have been receiving unemployment benefits, so they're able to pay basic things. But when those things run out, it'll become more of an issue.
Yeah. When we interviewed the head of social services a few weeks ago, he made a reference that was something I never would have thought about, that homelessness had actually gone up during the pandemic. And it was just one of those things that, we know it exists, we know it happens, but I wasn't aware that it would go up during this moment in time, and it has. So again, getting back to making sure we're helping those people struggle, that's important.
Right.
How do you think this will impact your church's long-term? Because we've talked about, there's lots of different things. The running example we've been using is, especially with school teachers, every kid will know how to wash their hands moving forward. So how do you guys think that this will impact you and how people meet and how you've traditionally done things?
Yeah, I think, as they've been predicting, we will see actually a downturn in actual physical attendance even after vaccines and treatments are available, because I think people are still, first of all, going to be wary of being in a building with any number of people for a long time. I think the other part of it is that people have found other ways to, connect spiritually on their weekends. They've tried to find other ways to do that, and I think that that's become comfortable for them. It's become a new routine. And so the routine of going to church may not be something that they're going to jump right back into, which means that churches like St. James and St. Patrick's will have to, at some point when we know it's really safe and people are through that part of it, we'll have to kind of relaunch what we are about to bring people back to actual in-person worship.
Do you have anything else you would like to say to the folks in your parishioners, in your churches, and in Madison County in general?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is that everybody remembers what is said all the time, and that is that we are in this together. And in a county, in a village, we should know we can depend on each other. And if people have a need, that they can call churches, they can even contact their village, to anybody, and I know leaders will respond as well. And also too, to just be on board with all of those precautions that are saving us, wearing masks and sanitizing our hands and doing the social distancing. I just think it's had a huge effect in keeping us all safe. And then again, to know spiritually, psychologically, mentally, when you get up in the morning, that if you're feeling uncomfortable or you're feeling stress or anxiety or you're feeling the heaviness of life, everybody else is with you. So I think that's what I'd like people to know.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We greatly appreciate it. You have a wonderful time and stay safe.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I appreciate doing this, and it's my privilege to do it, and stay safe as well.
All right.